You know that married man who suddenly looks different around you? He laughs louder at your jokes, finds excuses to start a conversation, and always seems to be paying attention to your every detail. Why? The truth is shocking. He's not really seeing you. You're seeing a version of something you've lost or never had. And the worst? He doesn't even realize it. Married men carry secrets they would never say out loud, thoughts that would embarrass them if someone found out. It's not just physical attraction. It's something darker and more complicated. You represent everything that died within his marriage. The spontaneity that became a checklist. The admiration that became criticism. The passion that turned into television on the couch. What I'm going to reveal now will make you see every look, every innocent message, and every coincidence completely differently. Are you ready to find out what's really going on in their heads? 1. You are the living memory of what he lost. When a man gets married, there is a silent transformation that happens in the early years. In the beginning, everything is discovered. Every conversation feels unique. Every moment together carries a special energy. He pays attention to the details. How she ties her hair, the way she laughs at silly jokes, the way her eyes sparkle when she talks about something she loves. There's a lightness in the air, a sense that life is just beginning. Over time, this lightness disappears. Not overnight, but little by little, like sand running through your fingers. Conversations that used to last for hours are now interrupted by cell phone notifications. Spontaneous plans become coordinated agendas. The sparkle in the eyes turns into accumulated fatigue from bills, responsibilities, and arguments about who forgot to buy toilet paper. Routine swallows everything, and then you appear. Without realizing it, without doing anything on purpose, you bring back that feeling. Not because she is prettier or more interesting than his wife, but simply because with you there is still novelty. Their stories are fresh. His laughter is not accompanied by demands. You don't represent the pile of dirty dishes or the argument about the maxed-out credit card. To him, you are like a portal to an earlier version of yourself, that version that still had unfulfilled dreams, that saw possibilities instead of limitations, that felt butterflies in the stomach instead of weight on the shoulders. When he's around you, he's not trying to conquer or betray. He is trying to revive something that died inside him without anyone holding a funeral. The problem is that this memory is painful. Every time he laughs at something you say, there is a second of happiness followed by emptiness. Because after that conversation, he's going to come home. He will open the door and find reality. The woman who barely looks up from her cell phone to greet him. The reheated dinner, the to-do list that never ends. The sex that has become a monthly obligation. You become dangerous not because of what you do, but because of what you represent. It is living proof that that energy still exists in the world, that it is still possible to feel that connection, that genuine curiosity for another person. And it hurts more than he would ever admit. Because it means that the problem is not that these things have ceased to exist. It's just that they cease to exist within his marriage. He starts looking for excuses to be around you. A question about work that could be solved by text becomes the reason for a 20-minute conversation. A group project becomes an opportunity to sit next to you. He's not planning anything. It's just trying to suck out some of that energy, that memory of what it was like to feel alive. And the cruelest part? The more time he spends around you, the more distant he becomes from his own wife. Because now there is a constant comparison, not a fair, obvious comparison. You don't have to deal with his dirty socks on the floor or his bad mood on Sunday morning. You are just the good times edited without the weight of real life. Does he know that? Not completely. In his mind, you're just a friend, a colleague, someone nice to talk to. But deep down in a place he doesn't like to visit, there is the truth. You represent everything he let die. And instead of trying to resurrect these things within his own marriage, he prefers to seek the illusion close to you. It's easier, it's less scary, and it's completely unfair to everyone involved. 2. The illusion of the woman without problems. There is a powerful fantasy that lives in the heads of married men. The perfect woman who does not complicate, does not charge, does not have bad days. This mythological creature always smiles, understands everything, is never too tired or too stressed. It simply exists in a permanent state of lightness and positivity. And guess who will see this character in his imagination? You. The big trap is precisely in the fact that he doesn't really know you. You don't share a bank account. You don't wake up in a bad mood next to him. He's never seen you crying because of PMS or freaking out because the Wi-Fi went down in the middle of an important meeting. To him, you're just a superficial, edited version of a human being, and that's incredibly appealing. Think about it, his wife is real. Completely brutally real. She has insecurities that explode into meaningless fights at 3 in the morning. She has complicated family members who show up unannounced. She has that annoying habit of leaving drawers open or telling the same story for the 1,000th time. She menstruates, gets swollen, has pimples, wakes up with breath and messy hair. She is human, you in his mind are not. You are an idealized version because he only sees you in controlled doses, always dressed up for work or social events, always with the most interesting stories because you obviously won't vent to him about that horrible argument you had with your mother or about how distressed you are about your debts. You have surface conversations, those that are easy and enjoyable because they don't carry any weight. And this creates an absurd distortion in his perception. He begins to compare the real wife with his imaginary version. Of course, the wife always loses. How could she compete? She has to deal with reality. She needs to charge when he forgets to pay the electricity bill. She has to complain when he leaves the kitchen all dirty. It cannot be light and uncomplicated because life is not light and uncomplicated. Meanwhile, you remain that ethereal figure who only appears in the best moments. You laugh at his jokes without rolling your eyes like you've heard it 1,000 times. You show genuine interest when he talks about work because, well, you don't have to hear it every day at dinner. You are new. And novelty always seems better than familiarity. The most disturbing thing is that he actually believes in this illusion. In his mind, you really are like this. Uncomplicated, light, easy to deal with. He fantasized a whole version of what a relationship with you would be like, based on absolutely nothing concrete. In this fantasy, you never fight for foolishness. You're never too tired for sex. You never criticize him or make him feel inadequate. It's a fairy tale where there are only good chapters, but here's the truth he completely ignores. If you really got together in 3 months, you'd be just like his wife. Because real relationships have bills to pay, responsibilities to share, bad days to get through together. You'd have PMS. You'd be annoyed when he forgot to do something important. You would also leave clothes lying around the house and have that day of the week where you just want to eat junk food and not talk to anyone. But he doesn't think about it. He can't. Because to think about it would destroy the fantasy, and fantasy is much more comfortable than reality. It's easier to believe that the problem is to have chosen the wrong woman than to admit that every long relationship eventually loses that initial luster. That real intimacy always comes with imperfections. So he keeps putting you on this impossible pedestal. And the more he does this, the more his wife seems inappropriate in his eyes. He doesn't realize that he's comparing a complete person with an incomplete idea, and this unfair comparison poisons everything. If this video made something finally click inside you, it touched your unconscious truth. In the pinned comment, you'll find the Jung method, a guide to help you stop repeating emotional cycles and understand why certain men can't forget you. 3. Because your attention is worth gold to him. There is something that happens gradually within a marriage that few men admit out loud. They become invisible. Not physically, of course, but emotionally, psychologically. The woman who once stopped everything to listen to her stories now mutters, "uh-huh," as she scrolls through her Instagram feed. The man who used to be the center of her attention now competes with notifications, series, worries about children, and an endless list of more urgent things. He comes home after a day where something important happened. Maybe you've managed to close a deal, or you've had a brilliant idea, or you simply want to share a thought. But when he starts talking, he realizes that she is only half present. Her eyes are on the screen, her mind is elsewhere, and he simply quit. He swallows his words and goes to watch television. This process is repeated hundreds of times until he doesn't even try anymore. Then you appear, and when he speaks, you really listen. He is not checking his cell phone every 10 seconds. He is not mentally planning what he needs to do next. You look him in the eye, ask questions, show genuine interest. For you, this is just basic education, being a person present in a conversation. For him, it is like water in the desert. Female attention has a power that many women don't fully understand. For a man, especially one who feels invisible at home, to be truly seen and heard is intoxicating. It's not about physical attraction or sexual desire necessarily. It's about existential validation. It is the confirmation that he still matters, that his words have value, that his presence makes a difference. Do you notice how excited he always looks when he sees you? How does he keep stories to tell you? How does he mention things you said weeks ago, proving that you were paying attention? This is no accident. He's addicted to that feeling of being important to someone again, to have an audience that really cares about what they have to say. At home, he already knows how the conversation will end before it even starts. If you complain about work, she will say that she is tired too. If she shares an achievement, she'll automatically congratulate without actually celebrating. If you try to talk about an interest of his, she will politely tolerate it, but is clearly not engaged. It became part of the furniture. Functional, necessary, but not particularly interesting. With you, it's different. You still find his stories interesting because they're new to you. You laugh because you really thought it was funny. Not out of obligation. You ask questions because you genuinely want to know more. And he feeds on it like a plant that has gone too long without sun. The dangerous thing here is that he begins to seek this validation more and more. A casual conversation is not enough. He wants to know your opinion on things. He wants to show you songs he likes. It wants you to see that funny meme. Each interaction is a small dose of "I matter to someone" that he can no longer get at home. And here's the critical point. He's not necessarily in love with you. He is in love with the feeling of being seen. You could be replaced by anyone else who offered the same level of genuine attention, but because you're there, available and present, you become the target of this growing need for validation. His wife probably doesn't even realize what's going on. In her mind, everything is normal. They talk about practical things, bills, appointments, problems they need to solve. She doesn't know that he misses being heard about things that aren't practical, about random thoughts, crazy ideas, small fears, simple joys, the things that make a person feel truly known. So he looks for that in you. And the more you innocently give that attention, the more important you become to his emotional balance. You become the person he wants to impress, the person whose opinion matters, the person who makes him feel smart, funny, interesting, everything he stopped feeling at home. The saddest thing is that this could be solved if he simply communicated this need to his wife. If I said, "I need you to really listen to me sometimes, not just listen." But he doesn't do that. It's easier to seek validation where it flows naturally than it is to try to fix the source that has dried up. And you, unintentionally, unknowingly, become this alternative source. His crime was simply to be a caring person in a world where genuine attention became a rarity. 4. You have become his emotional escape route. Every wedding has heavy moments. Arguments about money that leave the house in tense silence for days. Fights over division of tasks that resurrect old resentments. Conversations about children where no one agrees on anything. Difficult decisions about family, career, future. These moments create a dense, suffocating atmosphere where every word can turn into an explosion. He wakes up and already feels the atmosphere. You know, she's still angry because of that argument yesterday. He drinks coffee in silence because anything he says can be interpreted as provocation. Go to work carrying that invisible weight on your back. And all day long, a part of his brain is anticipating returning home, where the tension keeps waiting like a crouching animal. But there are you. Conversations with you have no history of conflict. There are no accumulated sorrows hanging in the air. You're not mad because he forgot to do something last week. You don't bring up that thing he did wrong 3 years ago. With you, he can simply breathe to exist without weight, laugh without guilt, be light without consequences. You have become his escape valve, the mental place where he goes when the pressure at home gets unbearable. It doesn't have to be anything physical or inappropriate. Sometimes it's just silly talk about anything that isn't a problem. An exchange of messages about a movie, a shared meme, a funny story. Small things that mean nothing to you, but that for him represent moments where he can forget all the suffocating complexity of his life. The danger begins when these moments of escape become necessity. When the first thought after a fight at home is to text you. When he starts to postpone returning home, making excuses to spend more time where you are. When the mere idea of talking to you brings relief that he can no longer find within his own marriage. This creates a destructive dynamic. Instead of facing the real problems at home, he sneaks into the comfortable fantasy you represent. Every time he chooses to send that message to you instead of sitting down and talking seriously with his wife, he's digging the hole deeper. But it seems so much easier, so much less painful. Why dive into difficult conversations when you can just float on the nice surface with you? His wife begins to feel the distance even without understanding exactly what is happening. She notices that he is less present, even when he is physically there. That he smiles at his cell phone in a way that he no longer smiles at her. That he seems to have the energy to be kind and funny to other people, but he comes home exhausted and grumpy. This generates more conflict, more tension, more reasons for him to seek escape. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more he runs away to you, the worse the marriage gets. The worse the marriage gets, the more it needs you as an escape. And you, completely oblivious to this dynamic, are still just friendly, just present, with no idea of the role you are playing in this emotional theater. He doesn't tell you about the fights. He does not mention how he feels trapped. He does not admit that he is using his conversations as anesthesia so as not to feel the pain of his own relationship. You only see the light side of him, the version that laughs and talks about nonsense. He does not imagine that his every message is a brick in the wall he is building between himself and his own wife. And here's the brutal truth. You're more useful to him precisely because you're not real. Because it's not part of the problems. You're like a movie he watches to forget about life for a few hours. Entertainment, distraction, temporary relief. But movies end and life keeps waiting. The difference is that you're not a movie. You are a real person who can end up involved in a complicated situation without ever having asked to be a part of it. Does he know this is wrong? On some level, yes. But it's so tempting, so much easier than doing the hard work of fixing what broke at home. Then it keeps coming back to you, looking for those moments of lightness, that feeling of being in a place where nothing hurts. And every time you respond with kindness, you are unknowingly fueling this escape. It's not your fault, but it is the reality of the situation. 5. The perfect woman who only exists in his head. You know what's really scary? He built a whole version of you that has nothing to do with who you really are. In his imagination, you like the same things he does. You would perfectly understand your choices. You would never react the way your wife reacts when he does something wrong. This imaginary version of you is perfectly shaped to fit into all the empty spaces in his life. He takes the small pieces he knows about you and fills the rest with pure fantasy. Did you casually mention that you like pizza? In his mind, this turns into perfect dates in cozy pizzerias where you would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Did you laugh at a silly joke he told? Okay. That means they share exactly the same sense of humor and would never have those uncomfortable silences he has at home. Were you sympathetic when he was visibly stressed? Obviously, you would be the eternally understanding partner who would never charge anything, never complain, never have a bad day. This mental construct is dangerous because it begins to emotionally relate to this false version instead of the real person you are. When he's lying next to his wife at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling and unable to sleep, it's this made-up version of you that he talks to in his mind. He imagines how you would react differently in that situation where the wife let you down. How would you make him feel better with just a few right words? How everything would be easier, lighter, more natural, more certain. The gigantic problem in all of this is that this perfect woman simply does not exist. You are a real person, with real flaws that he doesn't even imagine because he doesn't really know you. You have annoying quirks that would drive any partner crazy after a few months. You have deep insecurities that explode into complicated behaviors. You carry heavy emotional baggage from past relationships, childhood traumas, irrational fears. You also have those days where you are absolutely unbearable, moments where she is unfair for no reason, impatient with nonsense, stubborn to death because of pride. You are human, with all the messy and contradictory complexity that means. But he doesn't want to know any of that. He protects this fantasy tooth and nail. If you mention something that doesn't fit perfectly into the idealized image you've built, they simply ignore that information or reinterpret it so that it makes sense within their narrative. If you demonstrate some obvious human flaw, he finds a convincing excuse in his own head, because to destroy this carefully constructed illusion would mean losing the only safe mental refuge you have. And he desperately needs that refuge. It's the place where you go when the reality of marriage gets too heavy to carry. His wife is competing with a ghost that can never win. She is constantly judged and compared against a completely impossible version of perfection that even you couldn't achieve if you tried. Of course, she always loses this unfair competition. How could she win? She exists in the real world, deals with real problems every day, has real emotional reactions, faces real human limitations. Meanwhile, you float comfortably in this idealized dimension, where everything is still pure potential and nothing has been tested by the harshness of daily coexistence. The saddest thing about this whole situation is that if he really got close enough to really know you, the whole illusion would crumble in a matter of weeks or months. But he doesn't want that. He doesn't want to really know you. It wants to keep that safe and comfortable distance where fantasy can survive intact. where you remain the magic answer to absolutely everything that is wrong and broken in his life. The perfect solution that will conveniently never be tested by the brutal reality of everyday life. And while that's happening, he wastes an absurd amount of emotional energy loving a complete fiction instead of investing that effort trying to fix and recover what's still real and salvageable in his life. 6. The secret terror of being forgettable. There is a primordial fear that devours men silently inside, especially those who find themselves trapped in rigid and suffocating routines. The paralyzing fear of being completely replaceable. To wake up one day and realize with horror that they have left absolutely no true mark on the world or on anyone's life, that they could simply disappear from the map and, after a few necessary weeks of practical and logistical adjustments, the lives of all the people around would continue to flow exactly the same, without any real emptiness. He honestly looks at his own existence and all he sees is numbing predictability, same monotonous job for years or decades, same heavy responsibilities that are repeated endlessly, same empty conversations recycled every week. The wife already knows his every reaction before it even happens. She can predict every word that will come out of his mouth. There are no more pleasant surprises between them, no more exciting discoveries. He simply became a walking function inside his own home. Provider who brings money, partner who shares a bed, father who signs newsletters perhaps. But as a unique person with emotional depth and inner complexity, completely invisible, his wife no longer asks him what he really thinks about things. He does not show genuine curiosity about his inner world. She assumes that she already knows everything she needs to know, and maybe she really knows the superficial and functional version. But his deepest thoughts? The fears that wake up with him at dawn? The doubts that gnaw inside? The half-silly dreams you still carry hidden? Nobody asks. Nobody cares. He's just that constant, predictable presence that pays half the bills and takes up space on the couch. When you show up and show genuine, fresh interest in him as a person, something long dormant violently awakens. You ask questions about things that absolutely no one else cares to ask. You spontaneously remember random little details he mentioned weeks ago, proving that he was really paying attention. You consistently treat him as someone who is truly worth knowing, not just as another person who fulfills expected social functions, and it touches directly on a deep bleeding emotional wound that he wasn't even fully aware he carried. He begins to wonder obsessively, would anyone really miss me if I disappeared? Not the lack of the useful function I perform, but the lack of me as a unique individual, my specific jokes and kind of dumb, my particular and crooked way of interpreting things, my weird ideas that no one else would have. The wife would certainly miss having someone to split expenses, from the arms that reach high shelves, physical companionship in bed. But would you miss him specifically as an irreplaceable human being? He's honestly not sure at all. And this corrosive uncertainty corrodes everything inside like acid. Something different and addictive happens to you. He feels like he finally leaves some real mark. That the conversations between you have weight and true meaning. That it is not just another generic body occupying space on the planet. You make him feel genuinely memorable for the first time in years. Special, unique, irreplaceable. And for someone terrified to the bone by their own cosmic insignificance, for someone terrified of being just another forgettable face in the crowd, this is absolutely irresistible, addictive as a hard drug. But here's the hard truth, it's not real love that he feels. It is pure existential despair convincingly disguised as special connection. He's not in love with you specifically. He's in love with the heady feeling of finally mattering to someone. To be seen, to be remembered, to leave an impression. You could theoretically be anyone willing to offer this existential validation, but you are there, present and available. So you become the target and recipient of all this desperate need to prove to yourself that your existence is not completely irrelevant and disposable. 7. When admiration becomes constant thought. At first, it's just innocent admiration. He notices that you are smart, funny, interesting. He thinks, what a nice person, and goes on with life. But little by little, without realizing exactly when the line was crossed, you start to take up more space in his head than you should. Much more space. He wakes up in the morning and the first thing he checks is if you sent any messages. Over coffee, while his wife talks about the day's schedule, half of his attention is thinking of something funny to tell you later. At work, he finds himself staring at his cell phone with absurd frequency, waiting for his name to appear on the screen. When something interesting happens, the automatic impulse is to share it with you before anyone else. This begins to invade even the moments that should be sacred. He's having dinner with his family, but mentally he's going over that conversation they had earlier. He's watching a movie with his wife, but thinking about recommending that movie to you. You're lying in bed at night, and instead of sleeping or paying attention to the woman next to you, you're wondering what you're doing at that very moment. The frequency of these thoughts becomes alarming. It is no longer occasional. It is constant, obsessive. He tries to police himself, he tries to stop, but it's like trying not to think about a pink elephant. The more you try to avoid it, the more you invade his thoughts. You become the mental soundtrack that plays in a loop regardless of his will. He starts making elaborate excuses to explain why he needs to talk to you, a link you need to see, a question about work that could easily be solved by someone else, an advice that only you can give. In fact, he just wants a reason to initiate contact. Any reason will do. The need to interact with you becomes almost physical, an itch that needs to be scratched constantly. The most disturbing thing is that it projects reciprocity where it does not exist. If you take too long to respond, he gets anxious, checks his cell phone obsessively. When you finally respond, he feels a surge of disproportionate relief. If you use a smiley emoji, it analyzes the meaning for minutes. If you mention anything vaguely personal, he keeps that information as a precious treasure. It is building an imaginary intimacy based on crumbs. This constant state of mind begins to affect everything in his life. He gets annoyed when interrupted during conversations with you. He is disappointed on days when they cannot speak. It gets euphoric when you show any sign of interest or special attention. Your emotions are completely tied to your availability and receptivity. This is not healthy. This is obsession disguised as friendship. His wife feels that she has lost her husband's attention, but she cannot identify where she has gone. He is physically present but emotionally absent. I smiled at my phone in a way that I no longer smiled at her. He has energy and good humor for conversations with other people, but he arrives home apathetic and distant. She tries to strike up a conversation and he responds on automatic, clearly with his head elsewhere. And where is his head? With you, always with you, going over old conversations, planning for upcoming interactions, imagining scenarios that will never happen, creating a parallel reality where you have something special. He knows this is wrong. You know that you are letting thoughts about you consume space that should be occupied by your own family, but he can't stop. The addiction is installed. Each interaction with you releases a dose of dopamine that it now needs to function. You've become the drug he uses to escape the bland reality of marriage. And like any addiction, the dose needed only increases. He needs more contact, more attention, more validation. It's never enough. Because the hole you're trying to fill has no bottom. You have no idea how big it is. To you, it's just casual conversations with a colleague or acquaintance. You're friendly and polite, nothing more. But in his mind, his every word is analyzed, every gesture is meaningful. Every interaction is proof of a special connection. He turned an ordinary friendship into something monumental. And the more time passes, the harder it becomes to separate fantasy from reality. 8. The lie he tells himself. Of all the brutal truths about married men, this is perhaps the most important. He's blatantly lying to himself about what's really going on. And it is not a conscious and calculated lie. It's a self-deception so deep that he genuinely believes in his own twisted story. In the narrative he built, you are just friends. Just two people who get along well and like to talk. It's no big deal. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing his wife needed to know or worry about. He's not doing anything wrong technically. It's not cheating. He is not being disloyal. It's just maintaining a healthy, innocent friendship with someone interesting. This is the official version that he repeats to himself every time a pang of guilt arises. He knows that he thinks of you as an inappropriate frequency for a simple friendship. He knows that he seeks your attention in ways that go beyond the normal. You know that you hide details and omit information from your wife specifically about yourself. He knows that he would feel jealous if you showed romantic interest in another man. You know, you fantasize scenarios where you could be together. But to admit all this would be to admit that he crossed lines that he promised never to cross. So he creates elaborate justifications. She's just a friend, I can have friends. True, it can. But friendship shouldn't consume your thoughts 24 hours a day. My wife also has male friends. It may be, but he bets that she doesn't think about them during sex or puts them above the attention she should give her husband. I'm not doing anything physical, so it's not treason. technically correct. But emotional betrayal is as destructive as it is physical, sometimes even more so. The human mind specializes in protecting the ego from uncomfortable truths. He can't see himself as the kind of man who would be emotionally unfaithful. He can't see himself as someone who would put his marriage at risk because of a fantasy. So he constantly rewrites the narrative to remain as the hero, or at least as a neutral person in the story itself. You're just a friend. He's just being social. There is nothing much going on, but the actions tell a completely different story. The amount of time they dedicate to you, the emotional energy invested, the secrets kept, strategic omissions, the priority you received in his life without anyone approving or authorizing it. If he was honest with himself for 5 minutes, he would have to admit that he has been emotionally cheating for a long time. The worst thing is that this lie doesn't just harm his marriage. It hurts you too. Because while he pretends that there is nothing going on, he keeps involving you deeper and deeper in a complicated situation. He continues to seek emotional intimacy that he should reserve for his wife. It keeps building a connection that can't go anywhere healthy. And when it all eventually explodes, because this kind of situation always explodes, you're going to be in the middle of the destruction without ever having asked to be there. The lie he tells himself allows it all to continue. It allows him to maintain the illusion of being a good husband, while handing over bigger and bigger pieces of himself to you. It allows him to sleep at night without a burden on his conscience, even though he knows that his wife feels the growing distance. It allows you to continue on automatic, avoiding difficult conversations, postponing important decisions, pushing problems with your belly, until one day the lie no longer works, until it's too obvious to ignore, until his wife finds out, or until he himself can no longer bear to live in dissonance between what he pretends to be and what he is really doing. And when that day comes, the destruction will be complete. The marriage that could have been saved will be beyond repair, and you'll be marked as the other, even though you've never done anything intentionally wrong, all because he preferred to believe the comfortable lie instead of facing the brutal truth.